So today I'm here to give you guys what I think is a relatively small idea, but it's an idea that has lots of big implications. And put simply, that idea is that we should be really designing our web products and our digital software these days for the mobile experience first. And while this is just a simple idea at its core, it flies in the face of what we've been doing for the past 30 years of our graphical user interfaces and the past 20 years of what we've been doing on the World Wide Web. That is, we've generally started with the big screen experience first, thinking about desktops, thinking about laptops. And then if we did things with mobile, maybe we made a companion piece, maybe we ported things over, maybe we did some small things. But things have changed so dramatically over the years that I think working from the big screen down may be an increasingly backwards way of doing stuff. These days I'm not alone in saying that. This is the former CEO, now chairman of Google, Eric Schmidt, talking about how Google programmers are doing work on mobile applications first. And he actually has some eloquent reasons behind this, but unfortunately he phrases them in CEO speak. So you're going to have to forgive me for a second, and I'll translate what he says in a minute. He calls the mobile device the high-volume endpoint of 3 concurrent trends, which basically means 3 really interesting things are happening in technology, and the mobile phone is at the center of them all. So one is processing power. Modern mobile device has more processing power in our pockets than it took NASA to send someone to the moon. Connectivity. We increasingly have network connectivity pretty much anywhere and everywhere we go, unless you happen to be an AT&T customer. And 3 is assets and services now live in the cloud. So in addition to having devices with us that can do good amounts of processing, having them connected to the network, we can get access to our documents, to our software, and our services. Those 3 things together are a pretty powerful combination. This is my friend Kate Aronowitz, who heads up design and front-end engineering over at Facebook. And she has a similar story, which is Facebook is thinking about mobile first, desktop second. These days, I believe, for all of their products, not just some. Perhaps a more surprising company to be talking about mobile first. This is the CTO of Adobe, Kevin Lynch. And he's talking about mobile first being even a bigger shift than the transition we saw from the personal computing revolution. But it's not just companies that are in consumer tech and big internet. This is the creative director of Simple, formerly known as Bank Simple, who's trying to replace their bank of average people. And they're trying to rethink finances. And they're doing it by building the mobile experience first because they feel it helps them really strip down to what matters most. So there's lots of examples these days of companies coming out and saying, hey, mobile first is our top priority, if not one of our top 3 priorities. And they come from big internet companies, they come from media companies, they come from travel companies, finance companies, across the board. But I don't think we should do things just because others are doing it. So what I really want to spend most of the time with you guys today on is talking about the real reasons behind the mobile first philosophy. What makes it viable? Why am I a believer in it? And what are the benefits that you get from thinking and ultimately working this way? I think it boils down to 3 things. The first one is the growth we're seeing in the mobile device and sort of the mobile application and services ecosystem is just tremendous, which creates a lot of opportunity for either you or your competitors to come in and seize that new growth. The next one is mobile by virtue of constantly being portable. The whole point of a mobile device is that it can come with you. That introduces constraints, small screens, low network connectivity. And I believe those constraints are actually really good for design and for business because they force us to focus down to what really matters most. And last but not least, it's not all about limitations. There's also a slew of capabilities in modern mobile devices that allow us to rethink experiences and solve people's problems and meet our business goals in unique ways, ways that, frankly, desktops and laptops don't support today. So with those 3 things in mind, let's actually dive through each of them. And we'll start with the first one, growth. What better way to talk about growth than by talking about babies? Currently in the world, there's 371,000 babies born per day. So we, over the years, have gotten pretty good at this. But there's a downside. 378,000 iPhones sold per day. So it seems some of our nighttime activities have shifted a little bit over the years. Situation's a little bit worse for Android users because there's 1 million Android devices activated per day. Now, add up the total number of iOS devices, that is iPhones plus iPads plus iPod touches, and you're looking at 1.5 million mobile devices just from those two vendors compared to 371,000 kids born per day. Add in Nokia smartphones and BlackBerry smartphones, though their numbers are dwindling. Altogether, we're getting close to 2 million mobile devices entering our planet on a daily basis. Again, compared to 371,000 kids. Those of you that have seen the Terminator movie may recall that this is how it begins. But it's one thing to have lots of plastic, shining rectangles in our lives. It's another thing to actually have them used in interesting ways. And before they can be used, they actually need to sort of percolate out, right? They need to go from being a early adopter, kind of geek product to being mass market. So it also helps to look at how fast smartphones and other forms of technology have made it to mass market adoption. So in this chart, I'm looking at how long it took a technology to get to mass market in the United States, where mass market is defined as 40% of folks in the U.S. own one. So the telephone is off my chart. Came in around 40 years. Electricity in the computer, which you think everybody would want almost immediately, took around 15 years. Radio, mobile phone, internet getting closer to 5 to 10 years. And the fastest growing technology in the U.S. today, you guessed it, it's the smartphone. So this huge proliferation of the number of devices that's coming out is also leading to them being distributed to our audiences very, very quickly. And the way people use these devices is more telling, as I alluded to a little bit earlier. If we look at personal computing market share over the years, when we start out in 1975, when we look towards 1990, you can see the first 15 years are a couple companies trying to figure out what is the personal computer going to become. Names like Commodore, Atari, and Amiga. This is pretty typical for a new technology. It's a period where things shake out. Companies try new things and ultimately something sticks. And what stuck in personal computing was Wintel. If you lived in Redmond between the 90s and the 2000s, life was great. If you were in other parts of the personal computing space, maybe you weren't holding on to more than a thread like our friends in Cupertino at the top here. But looking at the past 3 to 4 years, things have changed really dramatically. Let me just zoom in on this to make the case even further. The green line is iOS, the red line is Android, and you can see them tearing into the share of personal computing. That's because modern mobile devices are highly capable. They're not just phones with a decrepit web browser. They're actually mini computers that allow us to do a lot of the things that we do on our PCs back home. And as a result, people do things that they normally would do on their laptop or their desktop. And as a result, Android, Apple, and the like are really starting to take a chunk out of the PC market. The other thing that's interesting to look at with mobile is how many of these devices are actually connected to the network. That is, how many of them can we send information to and receive information from. Looking around today, there's about 6 billion mobile connections. And Cisco, which sees network traffic probably better than anyone else, forecasts the next few years will get to about 10 billion, which, for those of you who are astute in the maths, you realize that's more than there are people in the world. That's because we're much more likely to have more than one internet connection as we go on, as those of you with a tablet, a smartphone, a laptop, a connected TV, a game console can attest. And this growth is happening really quickly. The other interesting thing to consider that I believe makes the mobile-first philosophy really viable, it's not just that the current audience of personal computer users is digging deep into smartphones and using them for everyday tasks. It's also that there's a whole generation of people whose first-time experience with the net and the web is through a mobile device. Little known fact that not many people talk about, in 2009, over 50% of new internet connections came from mobile devices. And looking at survey data in Africa and Asia shows today, 50% of people who get on the internet do not use a PC. they get online with a mobile device. Similar story in India. 49% of people who are getting online never or infrequently use the desktop. Facebook recently released data that shows 30% of their new users in India are signing up through mobile devices, and 30% of their total users in India are mobile-only users. And you may say, okay, well, that's the developing world. Maybe that's not your market. But looking at the UK and the US, we're starting to see a similar generation gap. In fact, we're seeing a generation who's starting to grow up mobile-only, if you will. Looking at data from the Pew Institute of Research recently, there's a number of people in the 18 to 24-year-old demographic who not only primarily use the mobile phone to get online, it's the only way they do many things throughout their day. And I think it's hard for those of us who have had 30 years of graphical user interface, 20 years of World Wide Web behind us, to put ourselves into a mobile-only mindset. To really think of what could we do for internet and software if mobile is the only way that people can use it. In Silicon Valley here, we often talk about Kenya as the Silicon Valley of banking because there, 17% of their GDP a few years ago was going through mobile payments. 54% of adults were using the M-Pesa mobile payment system. If you think about where we are in countries like the United States with mobile payments, we're very far behind. I think this is a case of necessity breeds innovation. The mobile device is ubiquitous, payment systems need reform, hence the two things come together to create great new solutions. So we have not only a proliferation of devices that are leading to interactions that were formerly reserved for personal computers. You have a generation of folks growing up mobile only. And that stuff together is actually leading to viable businesses on mobile. If you look at PayPal, who originally started as a mobile payments company, in 2009 they did about 141 million in mobile payments. 2010 moved up to 750 million, and then boom, 4 billion in 2011. This is the sort of trajectory and opportunity I'm talking about with the growth part of mobile first. And PayPal in particular has taken a very strong mobile first stance in the recent months. Companies that don't aggressively move in that direction up front may get pushed there anyway as their majority use switches from desktop and PC traffic to mobile traffic. Twitter, Pandora, both of these companies now have the majority of their traffic coming from mobile. And Twitter in particular has days where they make more money on mobile. The majority of their new content is created on mobile. When many people think of mobile devices as passive, here's a company who's actually getting more content creation on that platform. Other companies that haven't yet reached the majority share of traffic are seeing tremendous growth. So looking at StumbleUpon, their 800% mobile growth is causing them to have a complete review and relaunch of the rest of their experiences. And this is sort of the trajectory people go down when they explore mobile, learn things, and find the benefits of designing for mobile. They ultimately go back and say, hey, we want to take the things we learned from mobile and apply it to our other experiences. If you start from mobile first, you can sort of bypass that and get all the benefits without having to do the full circle that lots of other firms are going through. Now, I think the mobile-first philosophy becomes incredibly obvious if you look at a company like Mixi. This is the largest social network in Japan. 4 years ago, 14% of their mobile traffic was on, 14% of their total traffic was on mobile. Today, just 4 years later, 85% of their total traffic is on mobile. And when 85% of your traffic is coming from mobile, mobile first obviously becomes a way to think about how you meet your users' needs. And those of you saying, okay, well, that's a social network in Japan. Does that apply in my market? Looking at a very different market like the U.S., our largest social network, Facebook, recently crossed a similar milestone. That is, time spent on Facebook mobile surpassed use of its website. And that process took less time than Mixi, under 4 years. I think it was either 3.5 or 2.5. You can log on to my site, lukew.com, and I recently posted data on this. You can take a look. But it's not just this shift in usage of people going from using PCs to get things done to using mobile devices to get things done. It's also additional usage. Again, because mobile devices are portable, that means we can use them anywhere and everywhere, and new opportunities and use cases emerge. So Yelp, 40% of their searches, this is a local ratings and review service, come from mobile devices. That comes from only 8% of their audience. 8% of their audience currently is on mobile, but they're already responsible for 40% of all their searches. Imagine what happens when Yelp's mobile traffic becomes a majority share. Think about all the additional use that they'll get. They also have new kinds of use. Every second somebody calls a local business. Every other second somebody generates driving directions. For the real estate firm Zillow, people who use their service on mobile devices are actually in the location where they'd like to buy a home. This creates new opportunities for these companies that they can take advantage of, opportunities they didn't have when people were limited to only desktop and laptop interactions. Now, at this point, those of you who are astute in the audience, which is all of you, are probably thinking, well, isn't all of this just native mobile applications? Isn't that what's really driving all these growth and these numbers? So when I'm Twittering or Facebooking on my fancy Android phone, aren't I using a native app? And while it's true, Facebook gets a lot of use on mobile, it may be surprising where that use comes from. 50% of their 500 million users interact with Facebook on the mobile web. The other 50% are all of their native apps combined together. This from the company who has the #1 iPhone app, the #1 BlackBerry app, the #1 Android app. Having the #1 native app on all platforms, adding all of that traffic together equals the amount of engagement they're getting from the mobile web. And they articulate this pretty clearly. We see more people accessing Facebook on the web than from our top native apps combined. This is because this growth in mobile isn't just limited to native applications. The web is coming along with it, and in many cases, web use, that is a single application, the browser, trumps all native apps pulled together, as we see from the Facebook example. And I use Facebook here as a bit of a proxy for the web. They have 900 million users compared to 1.3 or so billion people on the web. So they're getting really close to approximating what's happening on the web. And as a result, they've spent a lot of time redesigning their mobile web experiences and redesigning them again. Sticking with Facebook for a second, this is Mr. Joe Hewitt, and he's the guy who designed the original, built and designed the original iPhone application for Facebook, which remains the #1 all-time app on iOS. And I really love this quote from him because it summarizes what the second piece of the opportunity here is with the mobile-first philosophy. It's not just taking advantage of this tremendous growth, the shift in use, and these additional use cases that pop up as mobile devices enter our lives. It's about actually being able to create a better experience. As Joe puts it, I was originally trying to make a mobile companion, but I quickly became convinced that I can create something better than the website. And that's part 2. How do the constraints of mobile, how do the things that define the medium force us to focus and make better products? Before we jump into that, just to quickly recap the growth story. The proliferation of mobile devices is leading to them taking away time from personal computers. Many companies are starting to see their traffic shift and start to see new additional uses. That creates a ton of opportunity for either those companies or, as I mentioned earlier, their competitors to step in and grow in this new form of computing. Now, on to reason number 2, constraints and focus. Because a mobile device has to be portable, it has to be small. That means the screen resolution we fought for years with our desktop and websites, 1024 by 768, gets slashed and burned when you look at a typical smartphone resolution. And granted, these are both sort of approximations of where we're going, but looking at just the 1024 down to 320 stereotype of screen size, if you will, we've just lost 80% of our screen space. That means 80% of the stuff that was on our pages has to go away. And I think that's fantastic. Because it's not like there's any websites or pieces of software out there where 80% of what they do would be better served if it wasn't there. I mean, I can't think of an example of a site up there that just crams a bunch of content into its homepage that gets in your way when you're trying to get things done? That would never happen, right? Now I'm going to pause for a second here and introduce you guys to a little principle in psychology, change blindness. And what change blindness is, if I show you two images and they're really similar, you may not notice the change immediately. So stay tuned, keep that in the back of your mind as I go from the Southwest Airlines desktop web experience to their mobile experience. So here we go. Desktop, mobile. Hopefully you saw some change. If not, we'll do it one more time. Here we go, desktop. And now we're back to mobile. Now what's happening in this mobile interface? Well, how does Southwest Airlines make money? They sell car reservations and air reservations front and center. What do their customers want to do? Well, they want to book those reservations. They want to check into their flight. They want to see the status of their flight. And if they're loyal, they want to manage their rewards or keep up with sales. So what we see in this mobile experience is just the core essence of Southwest Airlines. That is how the company stays in business and how it meets their customers' needs. There frankly isn't room for anything else. The constraint of screen size on mobile really forces you to prioritize and focus. And if you start the design process with these extreme constraints of small screen size, and you get to a priority with your team and your stakeholders and everyone that you interact with, and you say, okay, this is really what matters to us, this is what we're all about, there's no reason that should change as screen size gets bigger. So if Southwest Airlines had started mobile first, then moved on to the desktop experience, perhaps they could keep that focus and simplicity front and center around what does their business do and what are they doing for their customers. Another example we can look at is the photo sharing site, Flickr. So you may be familiar with Flickr, but chances are you may not be familiar with all of Flickr. Over the years, this service, like lots of other web applications, has grown. It's added lots of things. But when it came time to build their mobile website, they went from 60 plus options down to 6. And how did they do that? Well, it's a simple design process. Understanding your audience. Kind of design 101, if you will. What do people do on Flickr? What's the value they get? Well, they like to check in on their photos. Has anybody liked or commented something I've posted? They like to see what photos their contacts have uploaded. And they like to kill some time by looking at interesting photos, seeing beautiful images. That's what's front and center on the Flickr mobile experience. It's the core essence of the product. Again, designing mobile first gets you to focus down on what you're actually doing for people, which is good both for your customers and for your business. Now, to look at an example that isn't a home page, it was also important. This is the page on Expedia, an online travel service, that tells me what time my flight leaves. I'll pause for a second because that's actually a true statement. Here's the part of the page that I'm looking for. Everything else on here really needs to pixelate and die. And once again, let's compare the Expedia experience on a desktop with their mobile experience. Same information, but now they're actually even using visual hierarchy to emphasize which flight is leaving and when. I can move by itinerary or by date. And here's the real kicker. If I open up the Expedia mobile app on my phone, a little message says, where should you be? Flip it and see. I turn the phone sideways, and instantly it tells me, get your butt over to Terminal B, your flight's leaving in 15 minutes. How could these two experiences be any different? From slogging through this long page filled with blocks of text to find what time my flight leaves, to simply turning my phone on its side and having a real clear indicator of where I need to go. Once again, you see the constraint of mobile forcing you to focus on what ultimately creates a better user experience. And here with the Expedia example, we're using a little technical capability, accelerometer, to make this change, which we'll talk about in the third part of our talk. Screen size isn't the only constraint we have on mobile. It's also quite common for our networks to look more like this than this. Because these devices can be used anywhere and everywhere, networks are spotty, and we're not always going to have a great connection. As a result, performance is really important. How important? Well, consistently, people will visit mobile sites less and use them less if performance isn't there. In fact, increasing your response time from 2 to 8 seconds will drop off a third of your audience. These are devastating numbers. So speed really matters, especially in light of the network situation on mobile. As a result, we need to do a lot to make things fast. We need to send smaller sized files, send less requests, take advantage of modern capabilities. The bottom line, though, is if you make it fast enough for mobile, it'll be blazingly fast on all the other experiences that we need. And study after study of web experiences and software shows that 100 millisecond delays are a big deal. They cost revenue. They drop engagement. They reduce how long people stick around. So starting with mobile first, making it fast enough for the arduous conditions of mobile devices will mean you'll get all these benefits on the desktop. And mobile thinking doesn't just force you to look at the technical aspects of performance and speed. It also forces you to look at the design aspects. So photo sharing service Instagram, which was built from the ground up on mobile, they do a number of things to make things quick. They'll perform options optimistically. That is, they'll start uploading photos before you finish writing their captions, hoping that that's the image you'll ultimately use. And if it is, upload feels instantaneous to you. They'll also assume that a like or a comment has worked and display that to you instantly rather than waiting for the server to respond. They'll adaptively load photos based on where you scroll to on a screen. Lots of things to really optimize for speed and perception of speed, not just the technical aspects of speed. And again, all of these are things that will work great on any size device. So screen size is a constraint, networks are a constraint. The last one I want to talk to, which again forces us towards good design, is the different environments of use, the context under which we use mobile devices. If we look at our traditional environment of the personal computer, we have a big screen. We have consistent power, usually a pretty decent network, a keyboard for precise input, a mouse, a desk, a chair, and the latest Apple accessory, the coffee mug. All these things lead to long-term, comfortable positions that we can sit for several hours, in fact, at a time and work. On mobile, everything changes. The screen is small. The battery can go out, and often does. The network's inconsistent. Because the screen is small, we want the device to be portable. It makes sense to turn the whole thing into an interactive surface. There's sensors that know our location, the direction we're facing, how the device is positioned. All these things together create an intensely personal experience. One that I say is actually much more personal than the personal computer. That blue plastic tower that sits underneath your desk at home and you spray with an air can, that's not the personal computer. The personal computer of today is the device that's always with you, always connected to the network, knows where you are, knows where you're going. But because we can use these devices anywhere and everywhere, we have to account for the situations that gets us into. And while the stereotypical image of somebody using a mobile device is business guy on the street, someone running late to a meeting, or trying to find information about a restaurant, truth is most people use mobile devices at home, on the couch, while watching TV. 39% of people say they use smartphones in the bathroom, which means 61% of the world are liars. But if you look at this list, 80% during miscellaneous times, waiting in lines, at work, the story is we use our mobile devices everywhere and anywhere. They're not just on-the-go machines. And because we can use them everywhere and anywhere, I think it helps to think of people as a thumb and an eyeball when they're using a modern mobile device. There's distractions around, whether it's the TV set, whether it's something cooking in the kitchen, or whether actually someone is on the street. Partial attention requires focused design. If we look at our friends who build physical products, it's quite common for industrial designers, when they're creating something like garden shears, to create products for people with severe arthritis. Because if someone with significant arthritis can use a garden shear, everybody else can use it very easily and simply. This design for extreme conditions forces an implied simplicity that benefits everyone. So if we build our mobile experiences with partial attention in mind, when we have a lot of focused attention, people will do even better with our designs. Another thing we can look at that defines the mobile experience is when do people use these devices. We've looked at where and how a little bit, but understanding when these things come out of our pockets and our purses is also quite useful to designing for them. Looking at data from the service Read It Later, which is now called Pocket, this is when people read articles they save for later on desktop and laptop computers. What you can see is people are asleep, they read, they have dinner, they read a bit more, then they fall asleep. Contrast that to the same use case, that is people reading articles they save for later, now on their iPhones. And what you'll see first of all is that people are still reading pretty much any time. But when you contrast this to desktop use, you'll note that the times in which people read on iPhones are a lot shorter, burstier, spikier. The story is even more interesting when we look at when people read the same content on the iPad. Looking at this compared to desktops and laptops, we find that the iPad is actually a nighttime device and a morning interaction. That is, people are using tablets on the couch, in the bedroom. I swear I'm just reading tech articles. Looking a bit further, here's when people read news sites across the web on desktop machines. Here's when they read those same news sites on tablets. And this is fascinating to me. Seeing how the same use case, same service, the same task, how usage can change so dramatically when all we do is swap out the device. And we just say, hey, let's look at tablets instead of desktops. See this even further, let's hone in on one single news site. This is the Financial Times. This is when people read the Financial Times on a desktop, which looks like primarily at work. This is when they read it on smartphones. And you may say, what's going on here? Is that the morning commute? Is that the start of markets? Is this coming from the fact that people held their smartphones by their beds and then the first thing they look at in the morning? It's hard to say, but different devices definitely change and skew and create new behaviors. Another example, this is the professional network LinkedIn, overall use, mobile use. And if you contrast these two, my theory is during the day people hate their job, hate their job, hate their job, and then on the way home they're looking for a new job on LinkedIn, looking for a new job on LinkedIn, and then they pass out. Again, just a theory. Even if we look at abstract usage, so here we're just seeing how long are laptops, tablets, and smartphones connected to a mobile network. You can see the laptops, and this is a random sampling of one laptop, tend to get connected for longer sessions at a time, whereas the smartphone is very in, out, in, out. So what does this all lead us to? Well, looking at this diagram for XKCD of the things people put on university websites versus the things people actually go looking for, I'm very heartened by the message from Dave Olson on the Mobile in Higher Education blog. When he says, I was looking at the plan for our mobile site and all I have is the stuff that people are actually looking for. And I think what drives this is our constraints on mobile. Bandwidth is small. What are we going to waste it with? A letter from the president or a usable campus map? Screen size is at a premium. Are we going to put giant promotions for campus events or are we going to actually allow people to see the academic calendar? Mobile devices can be used anywhere and everywhere in all these different contexts of use. That drives us to real-world use cases like trying to find parking information or course lists. All this stuff, again, forces us to focus, and taking a mobile-first approach to design, I believe, pushes us towards the things that matter more. So with that summary of constraints, hopefully you see how limited screen sizes, limited bandwidth, and the modes of use of mobile devices get us towards products that align better with what people are trying to achieve. But as I mentioned much earlier, it's not all about constraints and limitations. Working with mobile isn't about cutting off what you can do and limiting yourself. It's actually accessing a whole new set of potential, where we get into the capabilities side of the conversation. That is, what can mobile devices allow us to do that means we can innovate? Remember I showed you how you can flip a phone on its side and see and detect that change. Now we can do the minimal amount necessary to make sure that we still have a decent layout when a device gets flipped, or we can actually make the experience better. Here on an Android phone, when somebody's composing a message in Gmail and they flip the device on the side, they're given more room to type, a larger keyboard, and the Done button moves up to the right, allowing them to have more space. We've used this little capability, this detection of orientation, to create a better experience for people. Our example from Expedia earlier did the same thing. Here's an example from an application called Instapaper that uses the same capability, this detection of the orientation of the device, to allow you to scroll smoothly. Just tilt the phone in the direction you want and read at the pace you like. The accelerometer, that is, the position of the device, helps you detect that and work from it. We can also access the gyroscope, which gives us a much richer picture of the orientation of the device and the position of the device. Here, as someone moves their phone, they pan around a 360-degree image. So if someone wants to check out a home they might buy, they simply need to move their phone in real space to act as if they're in that environment. Location detection. A modern mobile device has lots of ways of finding itself. That means on the travel site we can say, give me a hotel near me. Or we can do more sophisticated things. 2/3 to 3/4 of the time that a modern mobile device locates itself, it's using Wi-Fi beacons, which gets us down to 50 meters. GPS will get us even closer. But both are a heck of a lot better than the 99% accuracy we had that we're in a particular country right now, previously in the desktop web browser. Another example, let's assume you're either married or running late for a meeting. In both cases, it might be useful to communicate your location to someone and let them know when you'll arrive at the place that they are. This little application called Glimpse does just that. You can send people a temporary set of your location and they can keep up with where you are and how long it is until you get to their location. Quite useful. Another example of location, because many people assume it's just placing things on a map, the same service we saw earlier, Instapaper, will actually automatically download new articles when you enter your home or your office if you set background location updates. Just pick a place where you want the files to start uploading, and when you enter that place, the process will kick off automatically. Another capability we have in mobile devices is touch. We can use it to pull down and refresh a list, or we can use it to search for items just by drawing a picture, in this case finding homes near us and how much they cost. But we can also use it to really drive smart data analytics. And while people assume touch is sort of a naive, simple thing, this application Hive, which is designed for salespeople, allows a salesperson to exit a meeting, determine what stage he thinks the deal is at and how big it could be by just moving 2 sliders along. In aggregate, these signals turned out to be much more accurate at forecasting sales data than the previous systems they had. And compare the act of just moving your thumb twice on a screen to coming back after a meeting and filling out information like this. Clearly, the touch-based experience, not only in Hive's data showing more accuracy, but I believe allowing people to have a much better time at collecting this information. Touch in particular gives us a lot of opportunities for new experiences. Looking at this example of using the Photos app on the iPad, you'll note if they want to see what's in that list of photos, they'll just open it up. If they want to move the list of photos, they just push it up or pull it down. If they want to see one, tap it. See the next one? Push that one out of the way. Push that one out of the way. In this entire demo, you never saw anybody click on a button, a scroll bar, an icon, a menu. This is the principle between a natural user interface. That is, making the content the interaction, reducing the distance as much as possible between user and content, allowing people to directly manipulate stuff. I think there's a world of potential here, and many of our software products can really learn from avoiding Windows icons, menus, and pointers as the default, and trying to push for more direct interactions with content. So now I'll pause for a second and say we've looked at a number of different capabilities. We looked at the gyroscope, we looked at location detection, we looked at multi-touch. Think of these things in modern mobile devices as a palette of capabilities, as a series of technical innovations that we have to paint a canvas of interaction for people. It's not technology for technology's sake. It's being able to use these things to meet our business goals and our users' needs in new and hopefully more engaging ways. To deal away with Chrome, to be aware of where people are and use that context intelligently, to reduce the amount of effort they have to have in order to track their ongoing business and day-to-day lives. And you'll note in all these examples, I sort of talked about the use case, seeing what a home looks like, letting someone know when you'll arrive at their position, managing sales forecasting data. So that's really what it boils down to. It's not the fact that we have cool, shiny new tech. It's that we can use it in interesting ways. And so let's continue down this list and look at a couple more. In this example, I actually want to pull a few of these together to really hammer home this idea of capabilities for innovation. And again, to reiterate the mobile first philosophy, if you start with mobile first, this is the list of capabilities you have available to you, contrasting to the limited set you have on a desktop or laptop machine. When you start with this rich list, you may end up with lots of solutions you couldn't if you started with a more limited list. To illustrate that, let's assume we have location detection and we have direction detection. That is, we have a digital compass or a magnetometer that tells us the direction someone's facing. We can use these capabilities to solve a common use case, which is, let's say I'm in London and I want to find the nearest subway station, the nearest tube station near me. I can go to a web browser and type London Underground or London Tube into the Googles, and quickly I'll find the Transport for London site. There's blue links, so they're clearly clickable. Someone's used good white space, and I can quickly find the link labeled Tube Map. So I click that, land on another web page. Here they've used a visual design to include some markers that look like maps, so that draws my attention. Someone's told me that this link is a PDF. They've told me how big it is, so further usability best practices. Then I can click on that PDF and find the tube station nearest me, right? Well, it may not seem like an ideal experience, but it's using the best technology it has inside of the desktop web browser. SEO optimization, the ability to put links on pages and use them to connect other pages, the ability to adjust the layout of those pages, the ability to load PDFs in the browser. That set of technical capabilities drives what we can do with this experience. Flip over to mobile, this is an app called Nearest Tube. And what you see here is I simply open up the app and it uses my location and the orientation, the digital compass, to tell me which tube stations are near me. If I tilt the device up, I now get more detailed information because it detects that the device has changed orientation, and it tells me more details about how far away these stations are, which lines they serve. If I tilt it up even further, I'll get that same detailed information about stations a little further from me. The whole experience looks like this kind of crazy augmented world. And I'm not suggesting that this interface is a better way for finding a tube station near you, because frankly they both have some problems. But wow, is this experience different. The only thing that's changed is we've swapped out the capabilities we have. We have different ways now of solving this need. And I think that changes everything. And if you're doubtful about this augmented reality information interface, lots of people are. But Yelp, who I referenced earlier, introduced a little Easter egg that provided this augmented reality view of restaurants and places near you. And they found that it boosted sustained traffic by a real large amount. In fact, they were shocked and still remain shocked at how well this is working. Though the interfaces for augmented reality are clunky and poor right now, I think the potential of bringing you relevant digital information based on where you are in the world and the direction you happen to be facing, therefore your perception of the world, could be really powerful. To level set, Nearest Tube is a native app, so there are some things that we can only do there, like video camera access right now. But the mobile web is catching up quick. We have location detection, device orientation, and in more modern browsers we can access the digital compass as well. So some of these experiences can happen not only in native applications, but in the web browser too, as this digital compass access demo demonstrates. Now, what else can we do with our mobile devices? They're not just forms of output. They're also interesting new forms of input that are possible. That is, we can point the camera at a barcode. It'll tell us what we're looking at, tell us how much it costs on the web, give us only the good reviews or only the bad reviews, tell us how much it costs near us, put us on a map, and show us where we can go and get that product nearby. That's a heck of a lot of output just for pointing your camera at something. And because scanning barcodes can be hard, we can just take a picture of the product, have it identified, and tell us the same information. The other things we can do with barcode scanning is we can actually use them to turn ourselves into cash registers. Though that doesn't sound very exciting, hopping into an Apple store and opening the Apple Store app gives you the ability to scan a barcode, pay, enter a password, and walk out. And if you don't think people will actually use their phones for scanning, Red Laser that was acquired by eBay about 1.5 years ago has seen a 50% increase in the past year in scans, and perhaps more surprising, the pharmacy chain, Walgreens, 40% of their online prescriptions are now fulfilled by scanning on mobile devices. The more important message, though, is if we start from our desktop experience, if we start from the capabilities we have on the desktop, maybe our checkout solution ends up looking like Dell's, fitting a series of forms onto a small screen. Tell us what your information, tell us how you want to pay, go through and fill out the credit card details, please read this, continue further, and then they have the nerve to say, almost finished. Finally, you get to the end and you can submit an order. When you contrast this against Apple's solution for checkout, scan a barcode, type a password, and walk out, you start to see what this mobile-first mindset can do. Clearly, the Apple instance is designed with mobile in mind, whereas the Dell experience is really porting over something from the desktop to a smaller screen. And I recognize the Apple example is in-store and the Dell one is online, but both of them are the same process of buying a mouse from a computer manufacturer. One clearly started mobile first, the other clearly started desktop first. Which experience will win out in the long term? I'll leave you to decide. Further things we can do in terms of input. Google recently released a series of QR codes to their favorite places. So not only can you point your camera at physical objects, you can point at locations and see what that restaurant is, get information about it, reviews, phone numbers, menus. The grocery store Tesco in Korea has introduced these pseudo store shelves in popular business areas. So outside the subway, they put up these little posters that look like grocery store shelves. All you need to do is point your camera at them, scan the code, and say you want milk cheesecake. Press a button, take the subway home, and a few hours later, a truck shows up with your purchases. In a city where most people don't have cars and would otherwise have to be lugging plastic bags around on subways, this is really an innovative way to shop. Again, using the mobile as a primary experience. Google's done a lot with using cameras as input. You can take pictures of products and identify them, identifying wine by the labels, scan business cards through OCR and have them added to your address book, identify works of art. If you have an art history degree, I'm sorry. You can identify landmarks using location and the image you take. Those of you with geography degrees, my apologies. You can translate foreign language text. But it goes further. Not only can we input and process information, we can actually literally input things. This is the process of depositing a check into your bank. Basically turning your phone into an ATM. Just take a picture of a check and you can deposit it in more and more banks today. Or if you'd like to take a credit card payment, simply point your phone at someone's credit card. It'll automatically scan the number and the expiration date and allow you to take a payment right then and there by hitting a single button. Talk about easy input. As I mentioned earlier with card scanning, this is Card Munch, an application from LinkedIn that takes a picture of a business card and adds it to your LinkedIn contacts. And this is how much people have used it over the past year. As you can see, tremendous growth in pointing your camera at a business card to make contacts. A much easier way. What about taxes? Well, LinkedIn's TurboTax application allows you to simply snap a picture of a tax form, have that information inputted, review it real fast, submit it, and you're done. Taxes filed. Continuing on the notion of input, this is an application called WorldLens. And with WordLens, all you need to do is point your camera at foreign language text and it'll translate it for you in real time without a network connection. Now personally, I'm biased because they're not getting the fonts right, but hey, I'm a design guy, so who am I to judge? This technology not only is very compelling, it's also very useful. As you can imagine scenarios like finding out the beach is closed because of a shark attack, being at a restaurant and accidentally ordering Bolivian tongue with spicy anchovies, or perhaps most embarrassing of all, realizing that clothes are optional at the beach you're at. But it's not just pointing our devices at places and things. We can also point them at people and get information. This is a little app called Recognizer that uses facial recognition to identify someone and bring up their online profiles. This app was built by a company called Polar Rose and the Astonishing Tribe. Apple subsequently bought Polar Rose about a year and a half ago and have since integrated their facial detection technology in iOS 5. Couple this with some facial recognition algorithms and you're well on your way to having applications that can identify people and find useful and relevant information based on certain contexts. Now, the problem with a lot of these interactions I outlined to you is they all consist of what Nokia calls point and find. When I see somebody pointing their phone at an object or a person or a place, I tend to more think nerd found. That is, these interactions are a little bit awkward. But looking towards the future, we can use near-field communications. That is, the ability to include a little RFID reader, a radio frequency ID reader, to capture information from a physical object based on just close proximity. So we can put an iPhone near this car to play a video from the car, or near the hippo to play a video from the hippo. It just works without a lot of awkward snapping of images and processing. Simply the proximity of these two things allows us to interact with them. Google Wallet works on a very similar principle. Inside of Google Wallet, you can have your payment cards, loyalty cards, and offers. And in order to take advantage of all of those, all you need to do is put your phone in close proximity to a base station, roughly 4 centimeters. Foursquare has taken advantage of near field as well, where you previously had to open up your application to check into a location. Now you can simply put it near an NFC tag, an RFID tag, and a poster or a sticker, and check in automatically. You can even order your own versions of these things from Nokia. Okay, phew. Now we've talked about even more capabilities. Gyroscopes, location detection, multi-touch, video and images. I didn't even mention dual cameras front and back, nor device connections, nor proximity. I just scratched the surface of NFC. And what about audio? We have things like Siri that will tell us where Italian food can be found in North Beach. Is it going to be sunny this weekend in Miami? And much, much more. So audio is another capability we have to work from. It's not just voice recognition either. Audio can be used to detect the TV show that's on, as in the application Into Now, recognize songs playing near us. Who knows what we'll think of next? The bottom line is modern mobile devices have a rich tapestry of technical capabilities that we can use to meet our business goals and our user needs. And that makes them really ripe for innovation. I think that's the third part of the mobile first story. When you start with mobile first, you not only have this tremendous growth, this shift in use, and this additional use to take advantage of. There's also the constraints, screen size, bandwidth, modes of use that force us to focus and create better products. There's also these capabilities that I just walked through that allow us to rethink experiences, do new things. Put together, those three things I think paint a very compelling story for mobile first. And the way I would summarize it most simply is mobile is not only where your audience will be, if it already isn't, but how you can serve them best as well. And so with that, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. If you're interested in talking more about these topics, as I mentioned earlier, you can find me on the Twitter or on lukew.com. And I'm happy to yield more questions, talk a bit more.
I'll say a very big thank you to you for presenting such an outstanding webcast for us all today. We thank all of the attendees who attended the webcast and hope you benefited from it. Again, we thank you, Luke. Thank you, everyone. This will conclude today's webcast. Goodbye, everybody.